Hello, I'm Simon Fisherbecker. You probably know me better as Dorian Moldavar from Doctor Who, or the Fat Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek Podcast.
Your attention, masters, mistresses. All systems functional for the Everything Geek Podcast.
Hey, it's James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Master Plo Koon in Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Everything Geek, the podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek podcast.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your host Dory, and joining me is co-host Luan. And also joining us today is a very special guest. We have actor Reggie Lee, who plays Sergeant Drew Wu in Grimm and played Lance Nagirian in The Fast and the Furious, Bill Kim in Prison Break, Tai Huang in Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, Headless in Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest, Ross in The Dark Knight Rises, and the Test Administrator in Star Trek.
Well,
Reggie, how are you?
I feel better. that was the laundry list.
What?
Thank you for that.
And you have a lot more I could have read out. I literally just read out the geeky ones. I could have read out so much more.
Oh my God! I'd like to know that I've done quite a few geeky ones. That's good to hear.
Yeah, and it's a pleasure to have you join us today on the podcast, Reggie.
No, it's these particular projects that I think garner the most loyal fan base, and it's been a joy to do these projects.
Definitely, and we look forward to hearing more about them in this interview. So getting right into my questions for you, Reggie, my first question is, how did you decide you wanted to become an actor?
That is a question that I'm asked quite often. When I was a younger kid, because I'm still a kid, but when I was a younger kid, I saw this movie on television with an actor named Timothy Bottoms. I don't know if you guys even remember who that actor is. Fantastic actor, a Golden Globe nominated actor, and he was doing this TV show. And his performance, it was just incredibly moving, and I thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I really want to do. I promptly told my parents, and they promptly said, no, that's a hobby. You can't act for a living. So, but once I set my mind to something, I have blinders on, so I kind of go full force. But a great story, and I started studying, doing some local theater, and then I got into the Broadway scene, did some Broadway shows, and then came back and just really focused on my my on-screen stuff. But an interesting story about how I started was that when I was doing Pirates of the Caribbean, I had a little bit of a hiatus, and I did this independent film called Chinaman's Chance, a very unfortunate title, about these two railroad workers from China, two brothers, and they came to the U.S. back when it was popular to construct railroads in the U.S. And my brother ended up getting killed in a mining incident. But anyway, we had a surrogate family that was here in the United States that we were adopted by in the film, and the person who played my surrogate, my kind of like adopted father, was Timothy Bottoms. So I kind of came full circle doing that film, and it was such a joy to meet him, who was my inspiration all along. But that's a long answer to your very short question.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story.
Yeah,
wow,
cool.
Like really, really interesting.
And what a lovely man he is.
Yeah, that's really great. And as you said, it definitely came full circle. And who doesn't like full circle stories
does,
after all?
Especially us geeks. We do.
That's for sure. I think Luan was trying to say amen, so yeah, I'll just say it for him. Yeah. So moving on to my second question, how were you initially cast as Sergeant Wu in
Well,
Grimm?
initially the role did not even exist, and when I was auditioning for this particular role, I actually auditioned for the part of Hank that Russell Hornsby is playing. And it came down to three of us. It was Russell, myself, and another actor. And like 10 minutes after the audition, literally, they called me and said, "Oh, well, unfortunately, it went to Russell, who is perfect in the role. He's absolutely awesome and amazing. And as a matter of fact, when we were leaving the audition, I told him, I said, if I don't get this, I hope you do." And it was a great thing because it was a very, there were two minorities testing for the role, which is really fantastic in this industry. But then they called my agent and said, we really liked Reggie. We'd like to write a role for him. And hence Sergeant Wu was born. But the way they went about it with NBC was that the head of casting at NBC, she had to approve it. So they said, is it okay if we add another series regular? And she said, well, as long as you name him after me. And her name is Grace Wu. So that's where Sergeant Wu got his name.
That's a really interesting story. I mean,
Rory. I have
it's
stories.
Yeah, but that is really interesting. I mean, I really like when TV shows do that. Like, they have these additions to characters, but they end up really liking someone who additions and create a character just for them. Like, I know The Walking Dead did it with Norman Reedus. And like Daryl Dixon wasn't originally a character, got created after they like Norman. Yeah, he auditioned for Merle, and they didn't think he was right for the role, so they created Daryl just for him. So
he is so ridiculously popular. I do a lot of these Comic-Con conventions, and I swear, whenever you see him, it's like the slew of fans following him is ridiculous. So that's great to hear. It is great to hear. I mean, I think they're really open to, you have to be. And I think that, this character, even the way he was fashioned and how sarcastic he is and all that kind of stuff was kind of a creative process and came to fruition because of both of our kind of creative juices kind of putting it all together. So it's nice when that happens, in a TV show. I think it makes it better.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Moving on to my third question, you and the rest of the Grimm cast recently wrapped up filming on the 100th episode of the show, which is, of course, a fantastic achievement. How does it feel knowing that you're part of a show that will soon have aired 100 episodes?
It's crazy. Again, here's what I'm going to go back to is, when we were being interviewed about this 100th episode, it all came about so suddenly. It was like, wait a minute, we were just, it's like 5 seasons. You just blinked and suddenly you're like in the midst of a 5th season. And when you have this entire celebration, which was put out for us, and you realize how incredibly rare it is in this day and age. You see TV shows being canceled right and left after like 5 episodes. So to have aired or to have been filming 100 episodes, it literally is like, I equate it to, when people say, I've only heard that when it's like this near-death experience, and suddenly all these like memories, important memories, start flashing in your mind. And when I was asked about this 100th episode, it just started all flashing in my mind from when I started acting as a kid to all the hard work you put in, to the disappointments, to to the first Broadway show, to the first movie that I got. And it came to this 100th episode, and I was like, wow, I am one damn lucky bastard to have been here, and so it really hit me pretty hard. It hit me pretty viscerally, and I think it hit all of us pretty emotionally. And I think that that's a really great thing. And another thing it did was after 5 seasons, you get into a routine, and you get into almost like, wow, your character so well, but it really injected a great deal of inspiration in moving forward with these stories. And hopefully there will be many more, but they're getting very unique and very different, and it's giving all of us a different perspective on the show. So it is rare and amazing.
That's a terrific answer. Yeah, I mean, obviously you must feel it. Obviously, must be very proud. You must feel very proud, to
Well,
have
yeah.
been
I mean,
part of a
again,
show like
I keep
that.
going back to this because I think this is the day and age of suddenly, finally. It's interesting with the minority aspect of the industry, it, I think the Asian Americans kind of the middle of the crop in terms of minorities, and now we're finally starting to emerge as kind of key players in different TV shows. Like Stephen Yoon from The Walking Dead, and it's been a long time coming. And I always said, it's no longer okay to just have a minority in your show. You have to use us to move the story forward in some way. So it is, again, in that regard, having done this 5 seasons, having a handful of Asian American actors be part of a group that has reached that 100 episode mark has been pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and obviously it's a lot better with TV shows and films as well. Nowadays with more diversity as well, which is
Yeah,
what you
I mean,
were
it just
hinting at.
I think
So
it
obviously
really
that's a great thing.
represents it's a more accurate representation of what the world is really like. So in that regard, it becomes
Definitely. Moving on to my fourth question. You've been part of Grimm since the first episode of the show. Did you expect the show to come as far as it has when you
Well, we
started
knew we
working on
kind
it?
of, from the pilot episode, which was really strong, we knew we had something special. But I tell you what, being an actor, and I've done this for a while, and most of us in the cast are pretty seasoned in terms of having been in this business for a little while. David and Bitsy are a little younger, but for us, we've been around, so we never expect anything beyond that first pilot. So when we were picked up, it was a celebration. And then we just expected to do, our 13 episodes. Then we were picked up for another 9. And then we were picked up for a second season. And then it just kept going. And our room at the Comic-Con convention in San Diego kept getting bigger and bigger. So by that time, by season 3, we were like, I think we've got something really special. And I think that what really bodes well for that is that we ridiculously get along so well. I mean, all of us in the cast. I mean, we go to dinners together, we have parties together, we travel together, all of the above. So, and it's rare. I've been doing this for a while. That's very, very rare. So when you have that kind of camaraderie and some really great people coming from the top who have very little egos at all, it kind of filters down. And so in that regard, I do feel like, this is a show that warrants that longevity. But to have expected it, I never expect anything. I've learned not to expect anything. I hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Well,
See?
that makes two of us, but I mean, obviously, as a yeah. But of course, when something does go really well, like Grimm does, it really is the
It
best feeling in
is.
the world,
I'm
especially for a
telling you, it's really
performer.
difficult to get us on the set to actually start filming, because when you get all of us together and we're waiting to like shoot a a scene, we just start talking about everything and anything. And we're in full conversation mode talking, and we get into the depths of life, and suddenly they're like, you guys, we have to shoot now. So we go and we do our work, which we enjoy. We've got some really fantastic people that really care about the stories and care about the work. We all still do. It's a joy for us. It's a blessing. It couldn't be any better.
That's great. So, moving on to my fifth question. Season 5 of Grimm has just begun airing in recent weeks. If anything, what do you think makes this season special compared to previous
Oh
seasons
boy,
that
this
you can
season
talk
is
about?
kind of like turning Grimm upside down. This is the most different season we have had. It is kind of, there's an implementation of an entire faction of groups that start to come in. It's about a Vesson uprising this entire season, and there's a whole group that comes in that tries to deter that we kind of start maybe working with, and it is like Grimm meets the Matrix. So it is a whole. I will tell you, it's gonna get pretty funky, and it's kind of like modern age technology meets this old world Grimm. So it's exciting. It's exciting, and I think in the fifth season of a show, you have to do that. You kind of have to shake it up a bit. But relationships are very different, and there's a lot of us really working together. I've felt really quote Scooby part of this quote unquote Scooby part of this quote unquote Scooby part of this quote unquote Scooby gang. So, but then again, it's Wu is always the kind of person that is like, I'm going to be the best at it that I can be. So I'm going to find out about Vesson and be the best person knowing it. So it's been great. It's going to be different. I'd say about episodes 6, 7, 8, it gets really, really different.
Okay, so we'll look forward to those
Yeah.
episodes in particular and the rest of Grimm Season 5. So, moving on to my sixth question, and then we'll move away
Sure.
from Grimm just for a little bit, maybe. What have been your favorite memories from working on Grimm so far? Do you
Oh
have any
man,
in particular?
there are several things that come to mind. The first thing that okay, there we all, like I said, we all get along really well, but truly the times that we spend together, the Comic-Con conventions have been fantastic. This is times offset. So the Comic-Con conventions, because we're all together at the same time, and you're just amongst all these fans that you see that are crazy about the show. Just being with the cast in particular, our producers, Jim Kauf and Lynn Kauf, who are married, have a ranch in Montana, and they invite the cast up there with whoever your plus one, and we literally stay there for 3 days, 4 days, all we 3 nights, and all we do is sit on the porch and drink. Have dinner, go downstairs, dance, ride horses, hike, whatever. It is kind of like a family, and it's a really great bonding experience. But those times in Montana have been fantastic. In terms of being on the set and the story, when I brought about the Aswang episode, I'm Filipino, so they had asked, are there any folk tales from the Philippines? I said, oh my God, that's all they have there. That's all. It's an island. That's all they have are folk tales. That's all they tell. So I gave them three, and they chose the Aswang, which initially they said Aswang, and I had to correct them. It is not Aswang, it's Aswang. But to do that episode with which I kind of discover this whole other world, and to have it be part of my culture, a story that I've kind of heard about growing up all the time on the streets in the Philippines, and to have that come to fruition and kind of see the creature and kind of experience it all was freaky and amazing at the same time. And I think that has to be one of my most favorite experiences in terms of filming the show.
Wow, I mean, that really is great that, they look to you for, inspiration for this show. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I love that they're getting so much more multicultural, but they're using tales from all over the world. But to have really reached out and been open to that, they have been nothing but collaborative in terms of
That's great.
producers.
Moving on to my final question for you, Reggie. Do you have any upcoming acting roles or any other projects you would like to talk about?
Oh boy, there's been it's interesting. I was doing so many movies before Grimm, and then suddenly I'm so like one track mind. So I usually like to focus on one role. Just this past summer, I did a thriller called Behind the Walls, which is going to be really fun, and that's of the horror genre. The only other horror film I think I've done was a Sam Raimi film called Drag Me to Hell, and that was fun because Sam Raimi's pretty amazing. But having done this one, it comes out next year, and it's a really, really fun role and an interesting departure from Sergeant Wu, because after doing Sergeant Wu for 5 seasons, you kind of get stuck in that role, and then people only see you as that particular person. But believe it or not, in this next month, I have taken on, and they've allowed me to do another film. And it is called Sunflower, and it is literally set on a yacht almost the entire time. But I play, again, a cop, but this time a detective who is an alcoholic and who is about to lose custody of his kids. but is trying to solve this case uh, in about 3 days' time. So all my scenes are in an interrogation room, and we're about to start filming this very soon. And that's called Sunflower, and that'll be out
It's
next
really
year as well.
interesting, so I'll be sure to keep an eye out for that film. So
Yeah,
thank you very much,
yeah,
Reggie, for answering my questions,
absolutely.
and I'll let my co-host Luron ask his now.
Absolutely, Rory. It was so great
And I'll
speaking
let my co-host
with you.
Luron ask his questions now.
Sounds good. Let's hit
All
it.
right, I'll be fast. My
Oh,
first.
it's okay, Laurent. Don't worry. Don't worry. We have time.
All right, awesome. Well, what are some of the personal challenges that you face in acting, and how have you chosen to overcome them?
Most actors kind of their biggest obstacle is usually themselves. So that's something that is constant. It's interesting from myself to when I did Tropic Thunder, from to Ben Stiller and Robert Downey Jr. After you finish a job, you always think you're never going to work again. And these are people from me to those people. So that's an obstacle you kind of work with as an actor daily. It's like being good, being this, being that. But in terms of that's a very internal answer. But in terms of career-wise, it really has been. Um, I've been very fortunate to work consistently. However, when it is brought up to me, the challenges facing, and I will always bring this up, minority actors. And I can't. Here's the thing: I can't gripe too much because out of all my friends, I'm the one probably that works pretty most consistently, and a lot of my friends are Caucasian, and it's difficult for them to get work. So. But it is the challenges have always been kind of having roles that have substance to them and having things being written for me and for us and minorities in general that move the story forward that you can experience because you do experience, and I experience it even now all around me, is that it's like, hey, why are all these other actors getting all these personal lives integrated into their story and blah blah blah, and what about the minorities? Why can't we have love interests? Why can't we have something happen that a family, and that's starting to happen on television now. And I've been fortunate to be on a show that has addressed those issues for me, and that has really, they fortunately they give us all our time to shine every season, and it is all about our personal lives and our families. So I give a lot of credit to David Greenwalt and Jim Kauf, who started this series in bringing that forward, and also Bruce Evans over at NBC. And he really champions the minority aspect, and Vernon Sanders as well, both of our reps from NBC. But it has been it has been a struggle, and you think I've been doing this for a long time. When am I going to get a chance to have that simple story where it is a simple love story, where it is a simple day-to-day life? Because they write something so always off the wall and fantastical. A lot of times before Grimm was on the other side of the fence. I was bad guys galore. And there was a point where I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to play a bad guy. And then suddenly this role came to me that was a film called Safe that was opposite Jason Statham. And it was his main bad guy. And I was like, oh, God, not another one. So I looked at the role, and it was a very complex role because this bad guy had to adopt this 10-year-old Chinese girl, and because she was really good at numbers and cracking safes. After being with her for a year, I felt this really fatherly instinct towards her. Yet I'm going around, trying to figure out how to kill people and get money and use her in the meantime and have feelings for her as a father. So it was really complex, and that's what I'm talking about. And those have been the obstacles, has been, gosh, I really, really, really want to do that. In terms of overcoming that, I say to myself every day, because I describe a lot of crime scenes, and it has become, after 5 seasons, you describe crime scenes. However, there is this whole underlayer of, I just found out about the Vescent world. And I've been a cop for about, 20 years. In my wildest dreams, I can never dig deep enough into my acting persona or my soul to encompass 20 years, 15 years of being a cop. So in that regard, I just say to myself, you get a chance to play pretend every day for a living. How many people get to do that? Not very many people at all. So in terms of overcoming it, I get to go to Disneyland every day and play pretend. That's how I overcome it.
That is awesome. That's an awesome answer. I always like to ask that question. So that was probably one of the best answers we've gotten.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome. My next
It's
question
true.
for you is, which has been your favorite project to work on and why? And this is probably obvious, but I gotta see.
I know. No. Well, there have been several instances. Grimm, of course. I'm going to put that at the top of the list. Only because I've been able to sit with a role for so long and really live this life. It's what an actor wants. On top of that, the icing on the cake has been the people that I've worked with, and how the camaraderie that has been formed. I mean, these are friends for life now, and we share something that is rare, that very other you can't talk about with other people because it's difficult to understand, like anybody else. So that Grimm is at the absolute top of the list. From the creators of this show, we become a family. To NBC, I mean, seriously, you think of these people when you're in a career, you go, oh God, the execs at NBC, they've got control over us, or these creators, they're going to control us, and they've got none of that has happened. It has been like we've been just people, human beings, working together to collaborate to something on something that's really been very special. In terms of a very complex role, the role that I described in Safe was very, very complex, and I loved doing that because having played a bad guy all the time, and opposite Jason Statham, who was fantastic, by the way, as a person, a human being, was really, really special. The one thing that I will not forget, though, was when I got Pirates of the Caribbean, and they said in 3 days you have to fly to St. Vincent in the Caribbean, and they flew me there, little plane. Landing on like a cobblestone airport road. And then they took me on a boat to go get fitted for my costumes. And you round the bend on this boat, and then you round a big, huge kind of mountain. And then suddenly into view comes like all these pirate ships. And
Wow.
just a slew of like British soldiers. And it was a sight to behold. And that early on in my career was really something I will never, ever, ever, ever forget. It was a fantastic sight. So that's long answer. Sorry, Laurent.
No, you're absolutely fine. That was a great answer. That I can just imagine it in my head. It sounds incredible. And my last question for you, any, ending advice you would give to anyone looking to get into the career field of acting at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that it's something that I've always wanted to do, was kind of help younger actors. And first and foremost, I think, and I've mentioned this through my entire podcast, but seriously, in terms of minority actors, I was reared to be a doctor. This was never something, and I just believed that I could do it and that I wanted to do it. I just wanted to do it so badly. So for minority actors, I will say you can do anything you want, and the world is opening up for you. People are writing stories. Minorities are starting to write stories of inclusion, and you will be able to do it. However, my biggest piece of advice would be do your homework. Whenever I'm not working, if I've got a few months off, I will literally go to class, because it is a muscle. Imagination is a muscle, and imagination is infinite. So the more you work on that muscle, the more imagination you'll have, and it's the joy of it really comes from that. So I would say work. Nothing is the piece of advice. And people always ask me, it's like, how do you get to become that? It's like, well, you work. You got to do your work, and that's important. I will work 8 hours a day, whether I have, a huge scene the next morning or one scene the next morning, and I'll work on other stuff. But it is like, if you want to become a concert pianist, you sit, you practice for 8 hours a day. It's a 9 to 5 job, literally. That's what you have to think of it as. You got to put in the work. Besides that, I think the most, you got to have a healthy reason to do it, and that comes from a lot of personal work, a lot of questioning and going, is this really what I want to do? Would I be able to do this and be happy doing it in front of one person? Or is it something that it's like, I crave all this attention? You know, and that's something that is something to be questioned. If you really love doing it and playing pretend, that it starts there. Beyond that, the biggest piece of advice is do your homework and study. That's all I got.
Hey, that's the best advice you could have told me. Well, thank you so much for that, Reggie. I'm gonna go ahead.
Absolutely. This was such a pleasure. Such a pleasure.
Yes, it was very enjoyable.
Reggie, it's been a pleasure talking to you on the podcast. That's all of the questions
You
we
too,
have.
Rory. You too.
And hopefully we can talk to you again at some point.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk after the season is done. Then I can get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll talk to you again soon then. Bye, and thanks again for joining
All right.
us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
We'll see you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
He really was. You could tell he really enjoys what he does, and he puts a lot of work and effort into his career.
So, yeah, are you ready to wrap up today's show, Leron?
I am ready.
Okay, so make sure to check out our podcast links. Check out our website.everythinggeekpodcast.com/EGP. Check out our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/user/everythinggeekcast. Check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/everythinggeekp. Check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/official Everything Geek Podcast. Check out our Mixcloud profile, www.mixcloud.com/Everything Geek Podcast. Email us at the below email, everythinggeekpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our companion podcast, Everything Geek Comic Cast.